So should the USA's restraint, modesty, and generosity in responding to the collapse of its longtime Soviet rival. With America for the first time enjoying matchless power in a suddenly unipolar world, the new hyperpower made no attempt to abuse its standing. As Amy Chua writes, here was a society with unthinkable destructive capacity, facing no countervailing power. Yet it seemed to go without saying that the United States would not use its unrivaled force for territorial expansion or other aggressive imperialist ends. When it came to U.S. military might, the most controversial issues were whether the United States should intervene abroad for purely humanitarian reasons, as in Kosovo or Rwanda, and what America should do with its peace dividend, the billions of dollars the United States would no longer be spending on its military. Sidebar: no alternative to America. Fuad Ajami, Lebanese-born scholar at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University, wrote in June of 2008, yes, it is not perfect, this republic of ours, but the possibilities for emancipation and self-improvement it offers are unmatched in other lands. It is one thing to rail against Pax Americana, but after the pollsters are gone, the truth of our contemporary order of states endures. We live in a world held by American power and benevolence. Nothing prettier or more just looms over the horizon. The Bedford Falls Experiment. After the Cold War, American power represents the one indispensable element in sustaining hopes for an ordered and peaceful world. Christopher Hitchens writes, the plain fact remains that when the rest of the world wants anything done in a hurry, it applies to American power. If the Europeans or the United Nations had been left with the task, the European provinces of Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo would now be howling wildernesses, Kuwait would be the 19th province of a greater Iraq, and Afghanistan might still be under Taliban rule. In at least the first two of the above cases, it can't even be argued that American imperialism was the problem in the first place. This makes many of the critics of this imposing new order sound like the whimpering, resentful Judean subversives in The Life of Brian, squabbling among themselves about, what have the Romans ever done for us? Donald Kagan, reviewing the nation's ongoing struggle in April 2008 in the New Republic, notes that China and Russia may threaten American hegemony with a new axis of autocracy, but they understand and recognize the continued dominance of the United States. For all their growing wealth and influence, he writes, the 21st century autocracies remain a minority in the world. As some Chinese scholars put it, democratic liberalism became dominant after the fall of Soviet communism and is sustained by an international hierarchy dominated by the United States and its democratic allies, a U.S.-centered great power group. The Chinese and the Russians feel like outliers from this exclusive and powerful clique. You Western countries, you decide the rules, you give the grades, you say you have been a bad boy, complained one Chinese official at Davos this year. Putin also complains that we are constantly being taught about democracy. The best way to put America's place in the world in proper context is to call to mind a famous sequence from the most beloved Hollywood movie of them all. In It's a Wonderful Life, small-town banker George Bailey, Jimmy Stewart, contemplates a Christmas Eve suicide before guardian angel Clarence provides the ultimate life-affirming vision. He provides the disheartened hero with a dark, dysfunctional view of the town of Bedford Falls, as it would have been if he had never drawn breath, the community taking shape without his good deeds and benevolent influence. With that sharper perspective, George can go home to his loving family to celebrate the holiday with gratitude and joy. Those who condemn the United States should perform a thought experiment involving a global Bedford Falls vision. Imagine that the United States had never become a world power, or never existed at all. Would the ideals of democracy and free markets wield the same power in the world? Would murderous dictatorships have claimed more victims or fewer? Would the community of nations strain under the lash of Nazism, communism, or some vicious combination of both? Would multi-ethnic, multi-religious democracy flourish anywhere on Earth without inspiration from the groundbreaking example of the USA? Would the threat of jihadist violence and resurgent Islamic fundamentalism menace humanity more grievously or not at all? No one can provide definitive, authoritative answers to such hypothetical questions, but merely confronting the questions should help put the American role in more complete perspective. Just as George Bailey's view of an alternative reality convinced him that it's a wonderful life, even the briefest contemplation of a world without America should persuade us that it's a wonderful nation and an indispensable boon to all of humanity.